And welcome to this edition of Knightshift. I'm Eric Lopez alongside Kyle Nash and Andrew Gluchov for the first time together on this Night Shift postgame. First of many on the road, I have a feeling. Knights win 40-14 over FAU. Coming up, Kyle and Drew will recap and share their thoughts on the good, mostly good, some bad, some interesting ugliness. Coming up on this edition is the Knights improved to 2-1 in the season. Make sure you can follow us on Black and Gold Banneret on the Twitter, as well as blackandgoldbanneret.com. And of course, you can watch this show on our YouTube channel, as well as on our Twitter handle, Facebook. We're all over the place. And leave your comments right now and send your questions. We'll try to address them as best as we can. And of course, you can also listen to this on our podcast feed, as well as our weekly podcast. Gentlemen, first thought, it's a miracle. A CBS Sports Network game that did not go 4 hours thanks to commercials, although it felt like it. I don't miss being on CBS Sports Network. That's my first thought on the game. Outside of that, UCF needed to do what they needed to do. I will give you the floor, starting with you, Kyle. Your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, first of all, always the broadcasting professional first there, Elo. I respect that. Listen, this is what life looks like when you're able to actually physically compete in the trenches. And of course, you saw the expected chirping from the fan base and even calling the game. Well, I love the plays. I love the play calls that Coach made. It's because he could open the playbook because the O-line was actually competing. Ladies and gentlemen, that's life in the trenches. That's why it's important. And I'm going to maintain my stance that I started months back and started to even more clearly enunciate going through here on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast, Elo. You know, as much as Coach Malzahn talks about recruiting like his hair's on fire, which he clearly has done, it's time to put some beef on that grill, so to speak, and add some O-linemen to that recruiting structure. Because if there's going to be hope in the future in the Big 12, you need more games to be dominated like this when you're playing ACC teams like Louisville.
All right, so I guess I'll jump in since Eric left to go make a sandwich. Here's the thing. Obviously, on the defensive side, we saw a tale of two halves. First half, a lot of arm tackles, sloppiness, and the amount of yards after contact that Florida Atlantic was able to rip off was just absolutely huge.
Good call out.
But when the field dried up a little bit, second half adjustments, and these were all mental mistakes. This wasn't a game plan error. The coaching strategy and defense side was solid. It was just about execution. That's all in the player's head. We had relatively good outside containment that could have caused things to get a far bigger problem if it wasn't addressed early on. So you look at Florida Atlantic, which was a very explosive offensive team, and they were not able to really do much of anything. They ended up with 188 total rushing yards, 108 passing yards, obviously under the 300. UCF outgained Florida Atlantic 653 to 296. After the first quarter, I did not expect it to go this way. And I mentioned it on Twitter, third quarter is usually the kryptonite of UCF football.
Right.
Things go wrong in the third quarter. But in this case, it was the dead opposite. Everything that went wrong in the first half went right. Even an interception that should have been a touchdown turned into a blocked field goal. I mean, it's anything that was thrown at UCF turned into gold.
But is that because UCF did well, or is because FAU is just terrible? Because I
FAU
think really,
after watching, not a pushover team. Let me.
This was a team that lost to Ohio.
Okay,
Ohio's a weird program though. This was not a bad team.
I mean, we've seen FSU in the past in years with talented quarterbacks lose to Georgia Tech in the option. When you're an odd team like that, that's going to happen. No, that's a good point. And listen, let me put this polish on N'Kosi Perry, because understand, like this is a guy transferred from Miami. From those that saw the Campy World Bowl, where Miami nearly beat Oklahoma State when Derek King got hurt, Nicosi,
You would know because you were there.
I wasn't there because of the pandemic, Eric, but I did for the game. I was covering.
I was trying to say,
I was this close to being there. That's the way to look at it. But
I'm shocked when you're not at the game. Quite to put it to that way.
See, now you're flattering me, Lopez. No, but
flatter will get you everywhere.
And that's true. I have a big ego. But listen, like Nicosi Perry's performance to come in and take care of business like that as a backup, and he might have been a true freshman at the time. I'm trying to remember. But the punchline is this isn't a pushover as a quarterback, and his numbers show those signs of struggle. And listen, give credit to the defensive front that bounced back from a slow start. Drew, you mentioned arm tackles. I think part of it is them getting comfortable with their first road game. But Kyle, it's still in the state of Florida. Yeah, I get all that. But I think Gus Malzahn put it best on Monday where, listen, when you're at a road game, even in the same state, even when you have a lot of UCF fans there, it's harder to hear because FAU, listen, this was their Super Bowl. The Owls fans were out in force. Heck, even our photographer, Noah, got involved in the round table and picked FAU to win this game.
Yeah, and that's worked out well there.
Well,
He reversed psychology into existence.
Maybe, but the point is with the defense, there was a little bit of static they had to get through, and I think this is a lot of those young guys adjusting to that stuff early, right? Jeremiah John Baptiste, JJB, was not into play, and yet they still found a way after being back on their heels for a bit to step in and lock in. And that's what you want to see young guys do to fix up and get things right eventually.
Yeah, and I've always preached that you want your leading tackler to be someone in the front seven.
Yes.
And once again, it was the case. Jason Johnson, linebacker, who's one of the main three that rotate in, 10 tackles on the day, including a tackle for loss. He was the leading tackler. Tremont Morris-Brash had a very busy day working on the outside edge, 6 tackles. He also had a solo tackle for loss. You don't get until the third guy, Quadric Bullard, when the defensive back finally got in. That's actually good. UCF's defense, each of the first 3 games, have had linebackers as your leading tackler, and that's what we want to see.
Yes,
because they're the ones who cover the most area, especially the way this defense is designed. It's a hybrid 4-3 where you use that third linebacker as a tweener between that and defensive back. You can switch right to a nickel and never have to worry about personnel adjustments. So, you want to see the box score look like that from the defensive side. First half, a little rusty, a little rough. You're going to have bad times. It's going to happen. It's all about how do you adjust from it. And the second half adjustments of really just mentally getting into it and getting over yourself was absolutely fantastic. I attribute that to the coaching staff because they're the ones who kind of have to light the fire, but the players have to execute. The game plan was always there. It was a good game plan. And they had every opportunity to create a lot of tackles for loss against this Florida Atlantic team that can generate a lot of offense, especially on the ground. McCammon actually had an outstanding opening quarter before things started to quiet down.
True. Drew, I got to add in too. You got to give Josh Salskar a little bit of credit too in that first half too.
He's the other defensive end,
right?
I kind of alluded to both the defense in general with the outside containment. That's both Tremont Morris-Brash, that's Josh Salskar. The fact that UCF has players in the right positions doing the right things yields positive results. It was a problem that we had last year, especially in the early portion of the year where there weren't enough defensive ends to go around. Players had to play out of position, particularly Anthony Montalvo had to move from defensive tackle where he's at home, and he had a decent day too. Had to play defensive end where he was just out of position. It wasn't built for it. UCF doesn't have that problem, and they have an outstanding defensive backfield that just shut down this this Florida Atlantic passing team. They had a couple here, there. They had that one catch over Devontae Brown that was just perfectly placed. But other than that, it was crickets. It was crickets. This defensive backfield had pass deflections. They got in the face. They
right in the face.
Right in the face. They took advantage of Perry not really getting comfortable because the outside containment really forced him to have to stay in the pocket, and that pocket was collapsing. So he wasn't really able to kind of just get real comfortable. And the defensive backfield didn't give him opportunities. He overthrew a lot of passes. There was a lot that was uncatchable, and that's because the defensive backfield basically made it forced pairing the situation of throw the ball and make sure if your receiver can't catch it, no one can catch it.
Yes. No, and listen, really quick, Drew, we talked about the defense, but I know that Eric is ready to sound off on what went on in special teams because you've been calling it out for the past week at least.
Hey, no, but look, they benched the kicker and the punter. That's like I don't think I ever remember a team doing that for a game, and they did that, though, boys. They listen to us clearly.
You do what you got to do, and if making
and they should listen to us. We're very smart people, by the way.
Okay.
Far be it for me to argue, but nonetheless, no. And I mean, listen, credit to the young boomer stepping in. Yeah, he missed an extra point, but coming out of the gate in his first kick on the field where it counts, hitting a 41-yarder, I was cautiously optimistic starting at that, and he continued to take care of business. And yeah, that's the comment I was looking at too.
Yeah, that's your MG. So happy for Boomer. We've got our kicker, lads. That's
yeah.
When was the last time we got a compliment on our kicking game?
He may have missed an extra point, but you know what? Remember, he's a freshman. This is his first FBS game. There's gonna be hiccups. Be ready for some hiccups. But you know what? After that, he settled down and he took care of business. You know what? I could take a missed extra point here or there. If he's hitting the 41-yard field goals and he's instead missing an extra point, okay, I'll let it slide because you're netting more points.
Correct.
But I don't expect missed extra points to be a common theme. I mean, I expect that to be the one-off.
The one-off. All right, let's go. A couple other comments. First of all, Kotseg Advisor saying, what kind of sandwich?
Oh, I claimed you were going to make a sandwich when you weren't here.
No. I'm taking it. I'm waiting to find out. We should get word, and I'm hoping we can get this out before we end night shift on what time the kickoff of the Georgia Tech game will be, because Georgia Tech, UCF, and Indiana, Cincinnati were the two games that are right now fighting for. One is going to be on ESPN2 at 3:30 next Saturday, and the other one's going to be on ESPNU at 4. I think UCF Georgia Tech is going to be the 4:00 game on ESPNU because right now Georgia Tech couldn't beat the best high school team in the state of Georgia right now.
Georgia Tech is terrible.
Unbelievably bad. I mean, I'm not even convinced.
Terrible.
I'm not 100% convinced Jeff Collins will be the head coach by Monday. We'll see. So I think Cincinnati, Indiana will get that slot, but I'm going to keep an eye on that. That's why Bryson Turner is going to join us here and take over in a little bit on that. I'm waiting on that, but I may get a sandwich, though. I may get a ham sandwich. I mean, that's always a good deal.
Ham sandwich is officially the call. There you go.
Let's go with
ham sandwich.
I'll go ham. Michael Rakowski jumping in. Isaiah Bowser, still disappointing this year. You're not happy, I guess, with Bowser. Maybe he has him in the fantasy league.
Well, my man Rakowski, always critical. Listen, let me take this one for a bit, Drew. You don't necessarily have to like all of him handling the ball the way you do. People know he's coming. People key for that. But to not account for his protection and him acting basically like a fullback for John Rice Plumlee on designed runs, you're just not paying attention. You're making that very clear to me. Now, if you don't like the wild Bowser or the Bowser cat or whatever the heck they're calling it, I'm completely with you. But yeah, to get on Bowser's case and his production, they're looking for this guy to try to run up the middle because that's basically what the offense is expected to be until John Rice Plumlee goes all John Rice Plumlee on you. And Drew, let me ask you, I don't like using this term, but I think it's appropriate. That touchdown where Plumlee elevated and flipped and went darn near inverted, that had shades of Mackenzie Milton in it, in how it looked. I'm not saying that John Rice Plumlee's the next Mackenzie Milton.
I'll be honest. It was. You look at it from a picture standpoint, it's a better picture. He went higher. He got flipped more. I mean, it wasn't just a turn. I mean, he got flipped completely. I've seen side-by-side pictures. I like the Plumlee picture better. As far as from a photographic standpoint. But let's be honest. From a physical gifted standpoint, John Rice Plumlee is a better athlete than Mackenzie Milton. No doubt about that. This guy is a freak. He's got speed, he's got power, he has no problem lowering his shoulder like a fullback. It makes me cringe every time because I'm waiting for something to happen. But if you watch when that jump happened, he almost went over the defender completely, almost. I mean, that's ridiculous hops. But obviously you're going for the touchdown. This was the complete package out of John Rice Plumlee that we have never fully seen on the college scene. He almost had it against South Carolina State, but again, at South Carolina State, that's an FCS school. That I don't really count that as a barometer of how a player's development or what they really could do. This is against an FBS school that should end up in a bowl game by the time the season's over with. This was a legit performance, and he becomes the first quarterback in UCF football history with a 300-yard passing game, a 100-yard rushing game. It's never been done before. He now sets a new bar for all-time single game rushing by a quarterback in UCF
Drew
history.
is on the JRP bandwagon, baby. Let me bring in Bryson Turner, who's been waiting here.
Strictly numbers. But we're seeing why he's on the field. I mean, when the offensive line does their job and just gives some degree of protection, things are going to happen. I mean, that back shoulder touchdown throw, his last one was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And you know what? That doesn't happen if you don't have time to let the play develop. And I just want to take it real quick to the first of the two Alec Holler breakout passes. The one where he kind of went up the left side and broke open. There was a late blitz on that the player ran into Matt Lee. And yeah, Matt Lee got stood up a little bit and backed up, but he didn't break. He bent, but he didn't break. And they had the other gaps covered so that no one ever got to the quarterback and made an impact on the play, but it also allowed Holler to break open, and they made him pay. That's what you want to do with blitzes, is you bring a guy up who's not normally supposed to be there, make them pay, and he did. That's about as most successful as I've seen that UCF has done against a blitzer in quite some time.
And Drew, listen, and I know we were trying to get Bryson in. This is Drew's fault for bringing up this point right at that moment. But
I roll.
I know, right? Chaos. How many drops, buddy, did we see where Plumlee delivered the ball where it was supposed to be, and just blah 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 blah, right? I mean, that's good for where he should have even broken 350 yards. I haven't done the math yet, but certainly the drop by O'Keefe, that should have been a touchdown. Gamble should have been a sure thing on that one. See what I did there? But
how long have you been waiting on that, sitting on that one?
Well, he is the master of the dad joke.
Hashtag talent, fool. Anyways, no. But listen, Drew, you got to acknowledge, like, that should have been at least 350.
Oh, easily. There was 3 to 4 drops that would.
Okay, but all right, but look, this is the same. Let me calm down here a little bit before we put JRP on the the Heisman list here.
Yeah, you're beating me there, Eric. That's as much.
He is not on my Heisman list.
That's just about as much about the talent around him being immense. Can we talk about that for a minute? Like, and Kobe Hudson's not even on the bleeding field. Xavier Townsend, as a young man, is looking absolutely ridiculously good, taking care of business as a true freshman, where you weren't even necessarily seeing him, looking for him to do something like that. We're looking for him to make a difference in the return game, and all of a sudden here he is running screens and stuff. O'Keefe, we didn't know if he was going to play. Looked pretty healthy to me, gentlemen. So
they needed him. They needed him badly. And you see the difference in the offense when he's on the field versus when he's not, because he's the number one wideout. Javon Baker takes advantage of being the number 2 guy. Even if they swap, you have 2 number 1 guys on the field, and someone's going to get soft coverage, and you're going to make them pay for it because both of these guys can run downfield and do some damage. You look at the box score on receiving, and O'Keefe 6 catches, Baker 7 catches. They were busy. They were a vital part of this offense. And you take Collar's big play, his big 64-yarder away. They're the top 2 receivers as far as on the stat sheet goes, and they could, and especially Ryan O'Keefe, he could block too. He's a really good downfield blocker. Opens up lanes for Plumlee or Johnny Richardson, and I know we want to get Bryson here, and I apologize, but I want to give Johnny Richardson a bit of credit here. This is a very undersized player. But when used properly, especially when you get into kind of a scrum at the line, a guy who's 5'7" has this habit of squeaking through. And when he gets out, he's got this second gear, and you can see it happen in real time where all of a sudden he's running. And also it's just like the turbocharger just kicked in. You hit 4,000 RPM, it just goes. And he becomes really hard to stop. And that's what he brings to the table. And then RJ Harvey, welcome back to FBS football.
So I just wanted to say, because we're talking about JRP, and honestly, I think this is a very happy middle ground that we have going from him taking full advantage of his rushing ability while also being a little better on the self-preservation front. Because I know we have these conversations of, Mikey Keene's the better quarterback, put him in, blah, blah, blah. But really think about the advantage of having him, really, because I thought about this over the past couple of hours, and I realized, wait a minute. If Plumlee goes out running and risking himself, even if he does get hurt, we have a perfectly capable backup in the form of Mikey Keene. So why not take a little bit risk and let him do his thing, which is run? I mean, he, like you said, Drew, he ran for over 100 yards. He ran all over them. So let him take those instances where he has to run through the line, and he got some really big gains that way. And if the worst possible situation happens where he does get hurt, we have that backup in the form of Mikey Keene. So absolutely well done on his part. And actually, one at Jeff_Sharon on Twitter tweeted 2 hours ago.
Don't be tweeting him. He gets enough airtime.
No. We want real fans.
My point. He understood my
fans.
point. He said, "Man, JRP is one tough dude. He's taken a lot of hard hits this year and gets right back up every single time." Look,
he's a homer.
My point is that look. My whole point is that let him be able to do what he does best, and then we have the backup option there should we ever need it. I think we're gonna
need it. We're gonna need it at some point.
This week.
We're guys, this is FAU. I disagree with you, Drew. They're not going to a bowl game. There's a better chance Willie Taggart's going to get fired. The good news, though, is the American Conference as a whole this year not very good.
It's true.
Because, Drew, our Houston team is a joke. They got blown out by Kansas after losing to Texas Tech.
Hey, I'm a big stand for Lance Leipold, and say what you want. That man knows how to create a winner. He's a future Hall of Fame coach. He's actually, let me phrase that. He's a guaranteed.
Well, he's better than Dana Holgerson, who can't win a Big 12 game to save his life. And Kyle, your SMU Mustangs just blew a game against Maryland.
Yeah, I saw that. I don't know what.
I mean, this
league sucks.
Oh my! So yeah, it is. I kind of think the reigning champs might still be the best team.
Let's not go too far yet.
I'm not saying that's a compliment, by the way.
That's like telling poop.
But the point is, the good news is for UCF, I think they're still a flawed team, but everybody's flawed in the American. That's my point. That's the point. And so you hope that they can grow from this and move forward. But I think we're getting, I think somebody even said it best. MG said it. We should be cautious of this result. Next week will really show. Well, I don't know if next week. That's where I disagree. I wouldn't consider Georgia Tech a legitimate Power 5.
I would say Florida Atlantic would probably beat Georgia Tech.
I kind of agree right now. Yeah, I agree with that.
In fact, they probably beat them pretty handily. Georgia Tech is a really bad program.
Isn't that the same as not close, Drew? I think we just agreed.
Oh, yeah. I know that.
You think if they fired Jeff,
the statues are falling and the volcanoes are rising and the apocalypse is upon us?
Dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria.
Let's see. Other comments here making it a fallen hero, the base legend. First half scared me. Did anybody first half thoughts there, gentlemen?
Well, I was just sloppy. That's what it came down to. I mean, we know FAU had the ability to rack up yards. Granted, it wasn't against great competition, but they have the ability to rack up yards. So you had to respect that. And the fact that they were able to come out of the gate on fire, you go, okay, we may have to start going into shootout mode. Well, once the first quarter ended, things started going downhill. I think part of it's also when you play an in-state team, a lot of these guys know each other, and there's a mental aspect of it. It's like the rivalry game. Especially like UCF versus USF, stuff like that. a lot of these players know each other, and it kind of changes how they think about things, and they kind of gets in their own head. So once that wears off and you're able to just get down to the basics of this is my job, this is what I have to do, let the other stuff kind of wash away. That's when the game started changing. But, the emotion of the moment was in it. They were at home. It was a raucous sellout crowd. I mean, even with rough weather, it was against UCF, and who they're 0-3 against, and they wanted to hit them in the mouth, and they did. UCF got a good crack in the jaw, and you know what? They put that jaw back in place, and they got to work. And you know what? They're throwing poor FAU into the turnbuckle to the point where the refs pulled off, saying, "Please God, he's already dead."
Pretty good. All right, Bryson, you're going to read some of the comments and take over running this show a little bit. I'm going to pull a Gus Johnson and just bolt at halftime of a blowout, like he did in the Oklahoma-Nebraska game. And I'll let you guys know if I get a time for the kick for the Georgia Tech UCF game. But Bryson, what are some of the other comments?
Well, we have one where from at Retro Nighttime on Twitter saying UCF looked excellent in second half. That's best we played. That's the team we thought we'd have. Only 3 penalties. I needed it. That's a conference title contender. Let's talk about the penalties real quick for a second. That was something that was brought up so much on the broadcast. Even they were bringing it up so many times. Mm-hmm. I mean, what are your thoughts on those?
Well, of course they brought it up on the broadcast. Bryson, Coach Malzahn himself at both press conferences following not only SCSU but Louisville as well, took ownership of it after week 1, said we're going to fix it, didn't, and said that's my fault. I need to fix it. Even after I promised you that I would fix it, we didn't against Louisville is what he said. And, now he comes in. I think he finally started to shore that up. And listen, as much as Gus Malzahn kind of, rejected the concept that I put out on Monday when I asked him, hey, listen, how much do transfers and new faces and them not being comfortable in this building yet, per se, have to do with it? He denied it as a factor, but I'll tell you, them doing better on the road with another week of familiarity, I might have been onto something, even though he's not accepting it as an excuse.
I'm gonna go in a slightly different direction on this too. This is also, you looked at last week. Guys were getting beat up. They were getting dinged up. Louisville played a very physical game.
Oh, that's a good point.
And it seemed obvious that there wasn't enough work by the second team in working on creating that chemistry. And you saw it more on the offensive side when O'Keefe and Gamble are out. But that leads to problems. And on the offensive side, the line started trying to play hero ball, which doesn't work. Let the guy go. Okay, you lose. You don't get 30 yards on that chunk play. You only get 25. You live to play another down. You still got a new set of first down to work with. The fact that they were able to work with other players, the second unit, kind of do more stuff. As Kyle alluded to, Xavier Townsend got some action late in this game, and he looked good. He looked real good. I'm excited for this kid. He's shifty, real shifty, but they need that time to build that chemistry, especially when you're talking to a quarterback to a receiver. So I'm really happy with that, and it is official. Georgia Tech UCF, 4:00 p.m. on ESPNU. They kind of lost out in the competition. Not a surprise. Georgia Tech is a terrible team and is not exciting to watch. And I mean, it's true. Say what you want. They're just bad. And
it's true. It's funny because he's true. This is why I laugh.
See what you did there.
How much do you think that Jeff Collins could pull a Scott Frost and just get fired in like the next couple days? Because that was a really bad game that they had.
It's possible, but Georgia Tech has been irrelevant for a while.
Let me add this in too. Bryson perhaps wasn't even born yet. I'm joking. Actually, that might be true, depending. But listen, Drew and I were present for the game that got an Alabama coach fired. So, in the continued history of games that UCF wins that gets coaches fired, why not Jeff Collins as well if he lasts that long, right?
Hey, Kyle, I'm going to de-age myself a bit. I started the year after that. However, I was at the UCF South Carolina game in 2015 in Columbia, where Steve Spurrier quit after the game.
There you go.
So I'll make up for it there.
See, there's a tradition here, Bryson. Maybe you could become a part of it.
Well, I will say that this team has almost kind of defied recent tradition in that under the Frost Heupel era, it was the offense that kind of was the main attraction, with the defense needing to kind of pick up the pace. But this season so far, it's kind of been the opposite, where the defense really has been the one keeping this team in games. And even without Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste tonight, that defense once again showed up. I think that one drive after the interception, they were down at the 1 yard line and they got no points out of it. That was probably the best defensive drive of the entire season. Granted, FAU did have that one snap mistake, but you still had to stop them 2 more times, and you got the block.
I mean, going into this game, UCF had the 20th ranked total defense going into this game, and they kept them under 300 yards of offense.
And listen, Drew, throughout camp and leading up to, it's funny. Before camp, Gus Malzahn himself mentioned linebacker as an area of focus, right? They did a lot of recruiting for it. They got some transfers in for it. There was a lot of movement there where they were working on that spot in particular.
And they were worried.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, all of us were too. You know, I as much as I talk about, you know, me predicting losses throughout the year for UCF, where I did, a lot of it was connected to the linebacker core. Little did I know it was other concerns that would be the bigger the problem. The linebacking, the part that impresses me the most, gentlemen, is, and as much as I talked about new guys adjusting and things like that to crowd noise and all that, I forgot to mention JJB, or maybe I said it, I don't know, but if I did, I'll just reiterate it, whatever. JJB not being on the field, Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste, the only, quote, returning linebacker in the core, not being on the field to captain these guys, and yet still what happened. And N'Kosi Perry is not Malik Cunningham, perhaps, but he's not a bad quarterback, right? This is a guy that has done things in the spotlight, and, you know, T-Will had a good game plan, and those guys executed it well despite a lack of comfort that should be implied.
And not only that, but this was kind of taking a monkey off UCF's back. They were winless against Willie Taggart.
Yes.
You know, that's finally done with. You know, Willie Taggart no longer has UCF's number, right? He only was with a couple of different schools. You know, he went to between USF and then, you know, FAU. That's still, you know, that's all about the mental part. You know, football's a mental game. You know, once you get into their head, you've got them. And I think that's what really happened with Florida Atlantic is UCF's defense got into their heads, and they started making more and more mistakes. You know, they weren't able to cut off blocks, because if you actually look in the first quarter, the run blocking of Florida Atlantic's line was explosive. They were pushing linemen back. I mean, they have the talent to do that, but then it stopped happening. And I think a lot of it has to do with the mental aspect, because the defense usually does not tire, or tires quicker than the offense does. So obviously it wasn't UCF's lack of, you know, it wasn't conditioning on that. So it becomes a mental attack, and UCF never relented. They kept going and demoralized that FAU line to the point where they were just, I mean, look at what Lee Hunter did on that third down later in the game, where he just absolutely walked through the right guard for a tackle for loss. I mean, he just went right through. And it was beautiful to see. I mean, this guy is an absolute monster. I can't wait to see more of him on the field. Lee Hunter is a bad mamma jamma.
And listen, look at Bryson making production notes here. The point you made earlier, he's got on the screen right here about how the third quarter was a complete game changer compared to last time here. The tweet from Mark Daniels. I mean, like Bryson, what we saw in the third quarter from UCF, this game, it defies UCF logic and history in a lot of ways, right? The 2017 team, the national championship team, struggled in the third quarter. Well, you know, this is something that UCF teams tend to do. Not tonight, gentlemen.
Kyle, you could take that and turn it back. When UCF was an FBS independent, they still struggled in the third quarter.
This is what my man Stafford is on board.
This has always been a UCF problem. And the fact that they basically, you know, let's go a little nerd out there. They rolled a 20. They went perfect. I mean, the fact they threw an interception and that was returned just shy of the end zone, and it became nothing. It was a block. I mean, that just speaks for itself. They got more yards in between the plays where the stats aren't counted than they did when the stats actually matter. The offense couldn't do squat. It's just, and that goes back to the whole mental aspect. The UCF defense just mentally dominated them after the first quarter. You saw it kind of leaning that second, and by the end of the half, it was one-sided. It was a 2-point game, but mentally in momentum, it was one side. And then third quarter, their wheels fell off, and they never came back.
What really impresses me about the third quarter, actually, is I tweeted this out at halftime. I said before the game that the wide receivers were the ones that I think they needed to look out for, because N'Kosi Perry was a very prolific passer. But in the first half, it was the running backs that were really kind of taking it out on the UCF defense there. Looking at the final stats, they still have Larry McCammon still had 91 rushing yards, and Zabari Mobley had 83 rushing yards to finish off the game. But with the stats we're seeing where they didn't allow much of anything in the third and the fourth quarter, what type of halftime adjustments would you say the team made to help contain them?
Well, I cited this in the roundtable, gentlemen. What happened is UCF took the running dimension out of it by starting to pull away and handle business, right? That yardage that you see early on, Bryson, is a matter of them, the way they were gashing UCF early in the game, right? A lot of big games on the ground. And listen, it started. Listen, I get why UCF fans were panicking a bit, right? It looked like it was the start of the Louisville game all over again. N'Kosi Perry wasn't necessarily carrying the football, but the ball was still being carried, and for significant gains per carry, right? So with that in mind, I feel like the offense getting more involved, and then, granted at halftime it's a 2-point lead, but at some point UCF opened the third quarter getting the ball, and they were able to kind of impose their will and control it. Now, another statistical anomaly that you have there, Bryson, is we mentioned the interception down to the 1, then they don't get any points. They gained those yards, they gained those yards to get to that point, and then it doesn't happen anyway. And I like that you put up the comment there from regarding Lee Hunter there in the middle. Made a big thing happen. I believe he had the block. He and Tremont Morris Brash got up stupid high. I remember I was watching the game with a buddy of mine. I was like, Lee Hunter got up real big. He's like, he wasn't the one that got the highest up, and sure enough, in the replay, you see Tremont Morris Brash get even higher. He just wasn't the one that touched it. But I say all the above to say, you talk about halftime adjustments, and really, honestly, I think it was a matter of just locking in on the run and letting the DBs handle their business a little bit more directly, rather than worrying as much about, trying to do what they need to in coverage. The front didn't necessarily have to be as involved with that, but they really locked in, understood they were going to try to run the ball, and N'Kosi Perry was there to pass against a very talented secondary. True, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh well, I wrote in the roundtable, dare him to throw, make him win in the air, and he started off well, but then fell apart where it got to the point where he had 5 incompletions out of 7 passes in a certain streak. You look on the other side, you never saw anything more than 2 incompletions in a row by Plumlee. That may be a combination of both play calling and just execution. It gets in your head, but as usually you don't have a quarterback that can do it all. You usually have a guy who is a runner, or you have a guy who's a thrower. And Perry's he's not really in between, but he's more towards the runner than the thrower. So you know what? Dare him to throw the ball. Obviously, the wide receivers for Atlantic are not as strong, and you have a really good defensive backfield for UCF. Yeah. So make them throw. And once they were able to solve the missed tackling problem, and were able to hold them to maybe 2 yards a carry at that point, then you force them to have to air it out, and that's where you basically trap them, because they could not get any rhythm going, outside of early on, where they were able to make chunk plays. once that wore off and the defensive backfield started doing their thing, and you were able to put pressure up front, maintaining outside containment with the defensive ends, the well dried up, and it got to the point where they just weren't producing, and they were having to punt. That punter got busy in the second half.
Yeah. And listen, Drew, I love the part that you did get around to mentioning. Let us not forget, Drew, that in UCF's defensive secondary, there are 2 award watch list placements, I guess you should say, right? This is not a bad secondary. Thornton might be the biggest question, and he's still a veteran who isn't that bad. If that's the weakest link in your chain, you're not a bad secondary. N'Kosi Perry is a better quarterback than you should expect to see at an FAU. Thank you, transfer portal era, right? I was talking to Matt Murchell last week, and it's 46% of starting quarterbacks in FBS that are starters. 46% transfer quarterbacks as starters. That number is astounding to me. N'Kosi Perry, of course, being among them. Also, one John Rice Plumlee, right? So it's a situation where N'Kosi Perry is a better caliber quarterback than you expect to see in an FAU team. He can throw the football well enough. I agree he's more mobile than passer. Sure, Drew. But at the end of the day, that is a lot more throwing talent than you would expect from FAU quarterbacks of the past. Heck, I'm surprised no one in the broadcast tonight even mentioned Devin Singletary and what he used to do against UCF back in those days when he was there with the Lane Kiffin coached Owl team, right?
Right, and obviously, Kevin Smith, trading quite the guy. I want to throw another number, a little bit more stats out there. So when you look at what Perry did, he had 3 completions that went over 10 yards, 19, 28, 14. They were all those were part of his first 7 passes. So this was back in the first quarter when things were going well. You take that away. You take away those 3 completions. He's 10 of 26 for 47 yards because those 3 combined for 61 of his 108 yards. I mean, they shut him down on the passing game. You talk about two award watch players, Devontae Brown and Devon Wilson.
Right. Newt.
Yeah, Newt. They shut him down big time. And they had to rely on the run game. And even then, he wasn't really he didn't run the ball. It was 4. His raw number was 13, but because the stupid way they do rushing yards and sacks in college football, he ends up with a net of 5. Their best guy was Larry McCammon, who did great early on. He had that big 34-yard gain, all this other stuff. He ended up with 91 yards on the day, on 11 carries. So obviously, they have a 2-headed monster. Mobley 83 on 10, but still, once they got out of their own head and started. Instead of arm tackling or trying to be the hit stick or anything, they just got back to basics and just took care of business. They shut him down, and the entire second half is evidence of the results of shutting down and demoralizing a team. I mean, they were demoralized by the end of this game. UCF could do whatever they want, and let's go back to 2016. UCF versus USF. Willie Taggart has a chance to run out the clock. He chooses to run up the score. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you that wasn't forgotten by people who've been around a bit, and it's been talked about. And so, seeing Gus use Tommy Castellanos and RJ Harvey, you see Xavier Townsend late in the game. Aside from to give them some action. There are probably something there like, you broke the unwritten rule.
Listen, you as the historian on this panel, Drew, can think of a lot more ish that USF has done to cause bitterness for the Knights. I'm sure there was some.
Oh, well, but that's at least the Willie Taggart part.
Oh, I want to ask because you two are experts on this, and there's another tweet that I wanted to read out real quick. Eric Edwards, who I believe is on the stream with us, if the comments are any indication, tweeted after the game, and he put a little bit of a checklist. He putting what he liked. There was great play calling, great personnel changes, much better O-line play, much better with penalties. We talked about the penalties earlier, but I want to get to two of these, and that's the O-line play, because we mentioned the issues with that in the last couple of weeks, and you two are uniquely qualified to answer this. So what would you say the O-line
play? No, listen.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, let me jump all over this, man, because I saw the tweet in question, and I mean no disrespect to Eric Edwards when I say this, because all 4 points could be made valid. I might argue the coaching play calling being better. I don't know that it was better so much as the O-line being in a position to actually dominate this game, unlike they could against Louisville, and everything else kind of opens up. For the penalties, honestly, gentlemen, that was the defense getting better from last week to this week. That's what I saw. Because remember, I cited it with you and Eric last week on the night shift. Drew, you may not have heard it. The defense accounted for 3 consecutive 15-yard penalties to open 3 consecutive Louisville drives. And that's that discipline piece we were talking about that Gus Malzahn talked about the following Monday, right? So, hey, yeah, exactly. He kept his promise that the discipline shored up. I am going to make it a point to ask him about that on Monday. And thank you, Eric, for jumping in. Listen, those are great questions that you put in. Eric Edwards sets the table for me to approach this. The other 3 points, the reason you saw better play calling and all of that is all put into your 1 point about better O-line play. You can make better play calls when you have more calls plays to call in your book. Louisville took so much of the playbook out because of how they were dominating the tackles. And I mean, no offense to those gentlemen. They're large human beings that can take care of business and might even be a little bigger than me at this point, having lost 40 pounds. But there was a lot more domination up front. You didn't really see any false starts that I can think of. There might have been a couple, sure, but, they happen. There certainly weren't 11 penalties in this game committed by UCF, right? So, and I mean, like I said, you're exactly right. We mentioned Grable last week getting pushed backwards against Louisville. Yeah, and the point you make, again, pointing those things out is great, but I think they all come down to just the O-line play and then everything else locked into place behind it. And listen, I was in a happier place being a fat man at heart, watching that happen in the trenches that way, Drew. I mean, and to be honest, FAU suffered exactly the opposite, I could argue, right?
Well, I mean, I cringed, with that center exchange fumble.
Oh,
and, being a center, this game just absolutely sickened me on both sides of the field.
It's funny. As good as the O-line did this game, that play might be the only play where I saw Matt Lee do something that made me cringe so far this season. And it happens.
I was in a Twitter conversation. I reminisced back. When I was playing when I was younger. It was about 29 degrees out up in northern Ohio. It was snowy, and I lost feeling in my hands. And we didn't do shotgun very often. We were mostly direct snap. And I tried to snap one play. My hand moved. The ball did, because eventually I couldn't move my hands. I couldn't feel it.
Yeah, you told me the story. That sucks.
So I moved the ball, or tried to move the ball. The ball didn't move, but my hand did. So, of course, I get flagged for a snapping infraction. And I had to snap the ball with 2 hands, direct snap the rest of the game, because I didn't have any gloves or anything. So, not being in the most, they don't invest in, the football programs up there unless you're one of the really big boys, like the St. Ignatius is up there. But it's a similar thing of, you have to be on the same page and comfortable with doing, switching between shotgun snapping and direct snapping. I was a long snapper as well. I mean, the techniques are vastly different for all of these. You can do a direct snap and a shotgun snap from the same position of the ball, but you have to be on the same page as the quarterback. And 2, you have to, if you've got a wet ball, you can get away with kind of almost chucking a little bit on a shotgun snap. You can't do that on a direct snap. You got to make sure you have a firm grip on that ball, because obviously you need the quarterback to take it out. That didn't happen, and I'm not sure if it was because it slipped or if they just weren't on the same page. But between that and the snap that almost went over Perry's head on the I think it was the subsequent drive.
Yeah.
That almost that was painful to watch, at least from my perspective as a former center.
Gentlemen, we actually now have by the way, thanks to our friend of the show, Trace Troco, who posted it on his Twitter account of Sons of UCF. We got the opening statement from Gus Malzahn's post-game presser from after the game, so let's take a listen to that.
First of all, I'm just proud of our team bouncing back. I think everybody knows how tough a loss that was last week. We had some adversity early. They went down and scored. Early on, we battled in the second quarter, found a way to be up, I guess, by 3. A similar situation. We had the ball coming out in the second half like we did last week, and we really challenged our guys to really finish the thing, and they did that. And our defense giving up, what is it, 16 yards in the second half or something crazy like that. Our offense was, besides the turnovers, the turnover going in inside the 5, and then, of course, we had the interception. But our defense, probably the play of the game was, we tackled them on the 2-yard line. Our defense held and we blocked the field goal, and that just changed the whole game. But proud of our guys. It was a quality win, and we're back on track. So that's really what we talked about all last week.
Yeah, and the part I want to hit, Bryson, is last week with this group, I talked about 2 big penalties, calling back 14 points. This week, 2 turnovers in the red zone, calling back 14 points. Now, the difference here is UCF still pretty much won by about 14 points, so those are forgotten, but I'm willing to bet that that's going to be a focus for Gus Malzahn next week and moving forward. With the defensive side, honestly, from my money, there's not a whole lot I would see them fix. I really think it's something where there's going to be like, listen, we need to learn to deal more with avoiding arm tackles. I mean, if you didn't learn enough already in this game, guess what? Practice is going to reiterate it this week. I mean, honestly, hey, this is why T. Will's going to get paid the big bucks. I don't know what you concentrate on defense in this game personally, but offensively, cleaning up that turnover situation is definitely going to be the big deal. And credit to UCF for, at the half, having given the ball away more, still having the lead somehow at halftime.
Drew, what are your thoughts on what Gus Malzahn had to say?
Well, I mean, it was obviously a better tone than last week. He didn't have to say, this stuff's on me. But I think they had to do some learning of their own. The coaching staff is not perfect. They're not without fault at certain things too. But they also get to reap the benefits when things go right. And they were able to go back and look at their own schemes. Okay, here's the talent we have, especially at the offensive line, some of the challenges we have. What can we do differently that will cause misdirection? And I think that was the theme of today's offense, was misdirection. We had multiple flea flickers. And in fact, one was kind of more like a reverse, and it was like a double flea. It was a reverse into a flea flicker. We're seeing misdirection that buys time. You were able to see Plumlee roll out, and there was times where he still had the ball up, he was looking to throw, and then there was times he tucked it and ran. But when you have an offensive line that is suspect, especially on the left side, you notice he ran more to the right than on the left, just because he had more room to work with as far as time and keeping the blockers in place. That's part of the coach's job, is to develop a scheme, change things up that'll work with the personnel that you have. This was the challenge that they had last year when they had to change quarterbacks. They had one specific scheme for Dylan Gabriel, and they had to rebuild it for Keene, because he's not the same quarterback. They had different strengths, different weaknesses, and had a different speed of the game in front of them. So that's why these guys get paid the big bucks, is because they go back and they look at their personnel, they look at who they're playing against, and they scheme for it. So I think we're going to still see more of a creative playbook as far as some trickery as we go forward to buy extra time with the weaknesses of the line.
All right, so we have some more post-game comments, courtesy of our friend of the show of Sons of UCF, Trace Trocco. Ryan O'Keefe, who had 2 rushes for 25 yards and 6 receptions for 74 yards. He played this game, gentlemen, despite being a little bit limited because of injury. So let's hear what he had to say after the game.
This team's everything to me, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like I just need to, if I can go, I'm going to go regardless. You know, I wasn't all the way healthy, but, you know, last year Brandon Johnson did the same thing, and all my teammates did the same, so, you know what I'm saying?
Listen, you could be playing. I don't care. You could be playing a middle school, and Ryan O'Keefe is going to do his part to get on the darn field. And I don't mean to cheapen his comments, but
gamers are going to game.
Exactly. I didn't expect him to say anything any different either. You know.
Well, I mean, the good news is that they got the ball to him a lot more this time. I think one thing that I really saw an improvement of over last week is that the offense was able to get the ball to playmakers a lot more than they were last time. Like I said before, Ryan O'Keefe touched the ball 8 times. Javon Baker still factored into the game like he normally did. But Johnny Richardson had a much more increased workload this time around. And I think the rushing game success in this game showed that. 11 carries, 79 yards, 7.2 yards per game. With the way that Bowser is kind of going right now, having Richardson there to be that spark, be that playmaker, I think really put a spark under this rushing game.
Well, let's look at it from a couple of different ways. One of it is go back to the offensive line. They worked on gap assignments. You didn't see gaps being overloaded, and they were able to adjust. You know, we talked about the blitz that ended up leading to the first big Alec Holler catch, where there was a delayed blitz. Matt Lee was able to adjust, absorb it. It didn't take him out. I mean, the guy, it was like the freight train. He had a lot of room to speed up and get into full. So, you know, he dropped back a couple of steps after taking that hit, but he stayed up and didn't let him through. And, you know, they are communicating. You know, what you don't hear on the TV or even hear on the field is these linemen are constantly talking to each other, constantly at the line of scrimmage. And Matt is the one who looks and makes the line calls. It's all about gap assignments. You know, you're traditionally taught cover your inside gap. There's on occasion you don't, but that's about communication. You know, if there's a pull or you see a blitz coming, and you can kind of make a read. You make a line call to switch to the outside gap, and then the next guy knows to move to the inside gap, and you adjust. You know, when you do it right, you get this. You get the protections that you need. But you don't hear about that. I mean, the problem is the offensive line are such unsung heroes. It's the nature of the position. They're the guys who do a lot of heavy lifting. They don't get the glory. They never do. But, you know, that's one reason why Kyle and I are always very particular to point them out, is because, you know, aside from playing the line, we know what they go through as far as in the trenches. And, you know, once you have that part done, it opens up everything else on offense, everything. And, you know, right now, and this may change after this game, you know, John Rice Plumlee being the runner that he is, you dare him to throw. So you're stacking the box, and Bowser being an inside the tackled runner is running into a stacked box. And that causes some of his stats to be down, but that doesn't take away from the value he brings, because when he's on the field, they're collapsing in, and it opens up the outside where Plumlee can tuck it and run to the outside. Because remember, he's a running back, and, you know, playing quarterback as far as his speed goes. And then he can also pass the ball, and we saw it, you know, between Baker, O'Keefe, and even some of the other guys, Richardson out of the backfield. You know, he's moving the ball, and he's actually pretty good at distributing. He, you know, when things went wrong against Louisville last week, he started to only target one guy, you know, Javon Baker. Part of the problem is because he only had time to read one guy, and then he was engulfed. When he has the time, you see him go through his progressions. The first flea flicker, you know, as it was pointed out by Eric Edwards in our chat, did you look at the deep ball? Absolutely. You do that every time you do a flea flicker. You look at the deep guy.
Yep.
But you know what? He settled because that wasn't the right read. And so he settled for another player and made positive gains out of that. When you have the time, you can do that. So again, all of it always comes back to the line play. If you have a line that can do it and get it done and give the protection and the amount of time, you can see these things that we've seen today. If you can't get it done, then you're going to see what happens in the second half of Louisville. And I want to point out that a lot of that was coaching. Talent-wise, we saw in the first half, Louisville was a very physical team. They hit hard.
Correct.
However, the line held their own in the first half. It was when they were being out-coached in the second half that things absolutely collapsed. Gap coverages were off. They were able to collapse similar gaps, and they couldn't do anything. And guys were getting pushed off the ball. There was just confusion, and it all just cascaded. Again, it's kind of like what I said earlier about the mental aspect and the demoralization. The UCF offensive line last week got demoralized by Louisville at a certain point, and you couldn't come back from it. This time they didn't. It never got even close to that point, and they were rock solid.
Well, there were a number of demoralizing things from that game. But go ahead, Bryson.
Well, Drew, that offensive line certainly made space for John Rice Plumlee to get in what I think is probably going to be the most photogenic moment of the entire season. I know it's a little early to call it right now, but that flip TD by John Rice Plumlee was one of the most photogenic moments of the entire season. And Plumlee commented on it after the game. So courtesy of our friend of the show from Sons of UCF, Trey Troco, here's what John Rice Plumlee had to say about that touchdown.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of thinking to it. I don't know why, but you go up and you land in the end zone, and tell the guys, points are points, you know what I mean? However you can get them, you can get them. And so, ended up good for us.
How important was it for you to rebound from last week's game?
Yeah, bad taste in your mouth, for that one. And that was kind of the atmosphere around the facility, and you can kind of tell people want to get the bad taste out of their mouth. A lot of extra preparation goes in, trying to make sure that doesn't happen again. And ultimately, we came out and got the bad taste.
What bothered you about your performance last week?
I got to be better, talking about last week, but glad that we could rebound it this week. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff I can do better last week, but glad that we could make some corrections, get better from it, and ultimately do well as a team.
I have to chuckle, and I hate to take over the segment right after it like that, but listen, the absolute humor of not only how similar that play looked to Memphis and Mackenzie Milton in 2018 with the inverted touchdown run. I asked Mackenzie Milton about that the following Monday. Be darned if it wasn't the same sort of answer involving, I just kind of did it, and we were good looking to get points. And it's just hilarious to me how those are mirrors. I would be curious. I might have to go to the Sons of UCF tailgate and ask Mackenzie Milton how similar the answer was. For goodness sake, between the two of them there too. Like, it was just exactly the same thing minus Plumlee's accent. That's about it.
Well, you're trading one accent for another.
Indeed.
But I mean, the truth is, when you're in the heat of the moment, you're not thinking. You're just doing. And it's just crazy. You watch that again, and maybe just a couple more inches, and he clears the defender. I mean, he was almost clearing the defender in midair. I mean, that takes a massive amount of hops. I mean, wow. That just goes to the athletic talent that John Rice Plumlee has. Not to take away from Mackenzie Milton, but Mackenzie Milton's not jumping over a defender like that.
Hey,
well, John Rice Plumlee is a baseball player, an outfielder at that, so I think he'd have to have hops like that if he wants to rob some home runs. So I think that might have something to do with it.
Well, I don't know if he's playing in the JetBlue Park in Fort Myers, which is based off Fenway, where you have the big wall. I mean, maybe if you're playing against that, but most traditional walls are maybe a little bit shorter than that. But yeah, I mean, you do need hops. You do need hops, and
you sound like you trying to brew beer there, Drew. A little bit of a tongue twister for me there with all these hops.
I should mention that because I'm not a fan of hoppy beer, like IPAs and stuff. I'm not a fan of them. I like them, smooth like butter.
I don't need too much analysis. I just want to make the dad joke.
Well, I mean, you are the Banneret king of dad jokes, and I hope Jeff Sharon heard that.
I do too.
Well, speaking of not being a fan of something, I wanted to bring this question up because one other big thing that Eric Edwards mentioned in his tweet was the personnel changes, and today I think it will also stand out for the complete switch that the teams made on special teams, subbing in Colton Boomer for Daniel Obarski and Mitch McCarthy in for Osteen. Now, I can sort of understand the Daniel Obarski angle. Obarski has certainly been hit or miss a lot with his field goals, and so is trying out Colton Boomer today, I think is understood. I'll tell you what, that yearbook quote that he had is going to just keep being tweeted out forever, and I love it. But my big question about this is, what do you think the motivation was to substitute McCarthy in for Osteen? Because I believe it was you, Kyle, that tweeted, or no, it was you, Drew. It was you. I knew someone said it, that Osteen has one of the most yards per punt in UCF history, and I don't think a lot of people maybe had that much qualms with Osteen and his punting. So what do you think had to go into that choice?
A lot of people did, actually. A lot of people were very frustrated with how he was punting, and there is truth to that. There's a consistency issue. His numbers are a step back from his numbers before. He's averaging a little over 40 yards a kick. His average for his career is 42. So, you don't, that's only 2 yards. 2 yards can make a difference. It matters. 40 yards is good for 64th in the FBS. So, that's is it above the middle? Yeah, by a little bit. Is that where you want to be if you want to be top 25? No, it's really not. And you know what? Maybe there's a mental issue involved. Maybe there's a complacency issue involved, and it sends a message. And the only reason I made the tweet is because I hadn't heard anything. But when you think about it more, it sends a message. No position is safe. You have to work hard, deliver, and then work to get better. McCarthy only, had a 46-yard punt, early on in the game. And then UCF never really had the punt after that. It was either score or turn the ball over. So we'll see what happens. In the next game, I think Obarski's time as UCF's starting place kicker is over. I heard Scuttle. I had no confirmation that Boomer was a little dinged up with something last week.
I heard that too, Drew. Yeah,
and that's why he didn't play. But I think the plan was going to become, since Obarski still can't kick a field goal, to get someone who can. And I think his time as UCF's place kicker is over. They have Riker Casey doing kickoff duties, and he's pretty good. And now you have Colton Boomer as your place kicker. The real question is, does Andrew Osteen get back his starting punting job, or is his time over as well? That's we won't know that for a little bit.
And to your point, Drew, we don't know if Osteen himself is nicked up, but listen, all I'm looking for is for somebody to recognize the irony that a freshman, a new kicker, whenever he knocks through a field goal, the response is going to be, okay, Boomer. Just saying.
You absolutely are thrilled about that, aren't you?
You're damn right I am.
I mean, look, at this point, we basically have our own little Zach Wilson here now. I think there's going to be a little bit of Zach Wilson comparisons in terms of just there with the yearbook quote that will come up so many times. It'll come up so many times that let's just get it out of the way now, because it's gonna keep coming up. I love it, but it's gonna keep happening. I want to highlight Roger Greenberg's comment here really quick. We did better than last week. Now let's keep this winning streak going against Georgia Tech. I wouldn't say keep this winning streak going.
You have to have a streak first.
Brand new one. Yeah, we need to start a brand new one. And Georgia Tech,
a new one.
I think is a good opponent to do that with. Georgia Tech, unfortunately, is not off to the start of a really good season. At this point, I think Jeff Collins is going to be the next Scott Frost and get fired mid-season. But I think that this FAU game really establishes some positive momentum, not just in terms of the win-loss column, but also in terms of the development, where this team is going. I believe last season when Eric and I talked on the show, we talked about how this season, in our last season, the American, between the Big 12, would be really useful as a development year to get these players that are going to shepherd us into the Big 12 ready for that transition. And so I think that focusing on that developmental aspect is going to be something we want to pay attention to going into next week.
Well, I mean, you got to balance that because the primary goal is to win this year. You're not punting on this year.
Well, no, it's not about punting. I mean, you got to develop in order to
developing
win the year.
Developing on the players.
You want to establish that positive momentum because you want to keep that momentum going, like keep it going long term.
Right, but the primary goal this year, until you start getting towards bowl practices and stuff, is to win this year. It's not about next year. That's secondary. That's secondary stuff. Well, that's why you see Tommy Castellanos come out. He's got 2 more games left before his redshirt, limit hits. That's why you bring them out when the games are in hand. There's your development portion, but you don't let it take away from the primary purpose this year, which is win the games that are in front of you. The primary goal every year: win your conference. Every time, win your conference. Win the things you can control. You don't obviously a good coach is not going to say our goal is to win the national championship, because the way it's set up, that's so subjective that you can't control it. The goal is always win your conference, because you want to handle the things that you can control. So you don't want to detract too much from that with the idea of, we need to focus on these guys for next year. That'll come. That's part of the practice. That's part of the walkthroughs they do. And when they get into the 2 deep rotations, or even during a blowout when they get to come on the field, that's where you get some development work there. But I don't think it's nearly as close to a primary objective as you're making it out to be.
But isn't that kind of what's happening when you're facing a Georgia Tech, Drew? Listen, I hear the point you're making, and I definitely agree with it. But more than one thing can be true at the same time. And granted, you and I off air have had plenty of conversations about certain scheduling blunders that have made portions of this out-of-conference schedule as air quotes easy as it is. But with that in mind, if you're stuck with that, this is the opportunity to put some polish on what's going on. And listen, the whole Louisville situation, honestly, for me, there's plenty of things to grow from that with, right? The lesson learned from the Louisville game is that even though it is a team from a conference in the ACC for which I personally have very little respect, the whole lesson of your O-line still ain't there yet is a valuable one to take with you going into next year. And it's those kind of little pieces. Now, if you want to say that that's kind of secondary to the goal of winning the conference this year, no one's going to argue that, buddy. I think the development piece that we're looking at is to get the younger guys some of that opportunity to lock in, which we've definitely seen with the linebackers, right? And get some more of a litmus test about what else is working and what's going to struggle if you don't fix it right now. And I think that's the aspect. I don't want to say you're overlooking it, but I think you're kind of cheapening it by saying that it's not a concern.
Well, it's not that it's cheapening it; it's that it's not happening. It's flat out not happening.
What do you mean?
You look at a number of these position groups, offensive line. Out in SC State, they had second unit coming in and playing meaningful time. But that's a second unit based on depth, not really based on class standing.
Right.
In Florida Atlantic, they didn't do that. Obviously, Louisville, they didn't do that because they were losing. In other position groups, the youngest guy that I've seen, outside of Lee Hunter, who actually earned his way into the rotation, is Brandon Jennings, who's a sophomore, but he wasn't being put in because he's just to get him development time. He was being put in because there was an injury and he became part of the rotation.
Right.
So it's things happen as a result, but it's not the priority, and it's not really a priority so much because they're you get your chances.
Isn't it to say it's not the highest priority? And I think you and I are.
I wouldn't say it's not even a second priority.
Well, Drew, I mean, what I mean by development, it's not necessarily the people like the second team getting on. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that this team, college football is all about growing these guys. These players grow with all the snaps they take. and players like Javon Baker, Xavier Townsend, even Plumlee, he has several years of eligibility left. The whole idea about development is that with the playing time that these players get will help build their repertoire of skills up to where they could compete in the Big 12. And that's what I'm trying to get at. You're trying to nail this stuff down because, and this is just me going, if things stay as they are going into the Big 12, because the transfer portal can muck all of that up. But I'm going under the assumption that these guys stay. The idea is that you develop these players and build their repertoire of skills so that way they can be the best of their ability when the transition happens. That's what I'm talking about.
Well,
you
that's
want
part of the
to show
package.
constant improvement.
That's part of the package. They even do that's in the NFL. That's in every level that you look at. Is you're always looking to get better. That's why you do film study. That's why you do strength training and all that stuff. That's all part of the package. What I was kind of getting at is where you try to actually force guys who are not in your too deep into the situations where it may not be the most prudent to have just to give them game time.
Not like that.
You have to pick your spots.
That's not what I meant.
Yeah, to your point. Yeah, that's not. Yeah, I see what you're saying now too. No, I don't think Bryson was implying that. And I'll even add to your point, Drew, with the offensive line, because of the state of that lineup being, I'll just flat out,
a little thin.
Thin is great, which is ironic for an offensive line, but it's kind of a slur talking off at an offensive lineman. Perhaps
I'm offended.
But but you see where I'm going. Like, the fact that Sam Jack has come back and is kicked inside the guard. 2 fifth-year seniors were pulled in as transfers to start a tackle. Matt Lee is the youngest guy, but I believe he's a third-year player. He's a junior now, right? Mm-hmm. So that should tell you, development is less a goal with them as more as that is getting time together to gel. I get that. But yeah, I think we're in the same page, Bud, where we say that it's certainly secondary to winning the conference, because at the end of the day, you can develop all you want. If you're not still winning, fans lose interest, and that now is even more, if not just as important as it ever was before, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's look at Blake Barnett, who was a 5-star quarterback. He jumped from school to school. Ended up at one point at South Florida, like maybe his 3rd or 4th school. Some guys just don't develop, and that goes back. And then there's guys who are little 2-star players like Richie Grant, who develop and become good NFL players. It's all part of the process. That's part of the program. It's already built in. You're always working towards that. It really depends on the coaching staff and the person itself, themselves, if they're able and willing to take that next, because you got to be broken down a little bit. You have to tear you down a little bit and build you back up, make you stronger mentally and physically. And not everyone is attuned to that. With going to the transfer portal, it highlights how thin UCF's offensive line's been, how the development hasn't been there. And, as we know, it takes time when you bring in new talent to get them ready, especially where size and strength is such a big portion of it. It's, defensive back, I think, is a little bit easier where you don't grow quite as much. You need to be, able to handle a guy who's, 300 pounds, ripping at your face and whatnot. Say what you want. You know that there's plenty of hand checks to the face that don't get called. So I know where you're kind of going at that. It's just we're seeing the result of when it isn't working the way we want it to, with having to plug guys in the transfer portals. We're going to probably have to see it again next year in the offensive line. I'm not convinced that UCF's offensive line, once coming back, can handle the Big 12. I'm not convinced. So I think they're going to have to go back to the portal and bring in some more hot swaps to basically patch it while they continue to recruit and build up a working pipeline.
We've said so much in the podcast more than once already, Drew. I'll put it that way.
Well, gentlemen, the journey of 1,000 miles to the Big 12 begins with a single step, and it's all filled with single steps along the way. The next single step will be next week against Georgia Tech. They're coming back home. I'll be a whole year older, turning 22 soon, so that'll be fun.
22.
But I want to get some final thoughts on this game against FAU. Just general thoughts on what you think this week means for this team, starting with you, Drew.
22. My God, I don't even remember what I did for 22.
I was never that young.
I was never that young. No. I think I was still in school at the time. This was a good bounce back game, as John Rice Plumlee said. It's good to kind of get out there and just kind of bounce back after a loss last week, get the bad taste out of your mouth, and look on to sweeter things. And this is one reason why we have out of conference games in the front part of the season. Is those are the games you want to get this stuff worked out. You want to figure out who you are and where you're from. There you go, Kyle. You like that one? So it's all about finding the issues that you have and working to correct them, because then once the conference season starts, it's reset the counter. You're in full control of your destiny. So I think it was really good that they corrected a lot of things. We saw a better offensive and defensive scheme going into this game. We also saw better execution once we got past the first quarter. I think people just got caught up in the moment on both sides, both Florida Atlantic side and UCF. So they kind of got a little bit caught up. And once things settle down, you're back into, okay, it's just a football game, it's business. They were able to take care of it. You go to next week, it's also going to be a softer game. And people, it's a P5 opponent. Well, as we know, not all P5s are created equal.
What's the sword say in Ragnarok? Is it really though?
Yeah. Well, I wish I saved it, but we obviously UCF won the Cully Matrix National Championship in 2017. Well, they have an option on there where you can add games to it or subtract games from it. I added Georgia Tech to that to see what would happen to the score, and UCF would not have won. They would end up number 2 if they played Georgia Tech, because Georgia Tech was that bad. This is the same thing. Obviously, UCF's not geared for a national championship at this point. Again, goal's always the conference championship. The other stuff just comes along for the ride and it just happens to show up. If you're able to take care of things and get lucky, because we know the system is not in favor of schools like a UCF, and it took Cincinnati having an amazing lucky streak of things happening around them.
That's less Cincinnati and more about every single conference championship.
Again, you control what you control, you win your games, but they need a lot of help around them, and I'm not expecting UCF to get that kind of consideration. So you get this last game and you take care of a few more things, and then you jump into conference schedule. You've got to be as close to as your form of perfection as possible when that comes, so that you can take care of business and be able to play and hopefully host that game first Saturday in December.
Well, Drew, I have one last little nugget question for you. So back during the first half when things weren't going very well, I saw this tweet from @LonelyBUCF where he said positives, gold pants, negatives, everything else. So what did you think about the gold pants and also about that little uniform malfunction that John Rice Plumlee had?
Well, I kind of laughed at the whole uniform malfunction. I'm wondering if they missized his jersey or something, because he did not look very happy when they were changing it, when they were showing the clip on it. This uniform was very reminiscent of the 2013 to 15 series, which I'll be honest, I could do without. I have no problem with gold pants. That has been UCF's thing for longer than I've been around the school. Obviously, my favorite uniform is 2003, where they had the Aztec neck and gold pants and helmet that actually matched each other, and back from the Russell Athletic days. I keep going back to it, where the lack of TV numbers and the fact that the Pegasus is so sublimated that it disappears, and even when you kind of were looking at them as kind of partway close, the Pegasus disappeared. You zoom out, it's non-existent. And so you have this white jersey that looks really plain and then you have a number in the middle. And I'm sorry, if you want to call yourself Drip U, you got to do better. I'm sorry. I'm looking forward to 2 years from now when these get a full redesign, because I think they dropped the ball on that big time.
All right, Kyle Nash, student of the game. I asked Drew this. I'll ask you as well. What are your final general thoughts on this week, and what do you want to see going forward with this team?
You know, and it's funny, Bryson. You know, there are some comments that try to act like that I am a University of West Florida fan, and there are others that tell me I'm entirely too excited.
Kyle, I'm called a Mike Oresco.
Yeah, no, we know you're the burner account. I get it. But the punchline is this, man. Like, there are people in here trying to tell me that I'm all excited about what's going on. And listen, I'm still picking SMU to be the champions of the conference, right? I'm still that guy. You know, I'm the one that picked UCF to lose to Louisville, and yet I'm being told I'm too optimistic. You gotta love the comments, ladies and gentlemen.
Well,
it's cool, man. Listen, we're here to have fun with it. They can say what they want. I'm glad they're here to say it. But there's a comment that's in here. I don't know that we've highlighted it. Something along the lines of the number of screens run were still the same. The difference is that the screens worked against FAU. No,
they didn't run as many.
Well, let's pretend it is accurate, Drew. I haven't seen those stats. Maybe this individual, I think it's Football Fan 28 that the comment's coming from. Maybe this individual saw a stat line that told them that. That's fantastic. Here's the part that I think's completely forgot about, that all three of us at one point or another during the week's coverage on the Black and Gold Banneret have pointed out. This pass defense is not as strong as Louisville's and a lot of the others of teams that will be faced by the UCF Knights. And they took advantage of it. That's called a game plan. That is what's meant to happen.
You play to win the game.
I mean, thank you, Herm. But at the end of the day, listen, I think we're still going to say the same thing that we've been saying. The O-line was able to dominate in a way they couldn't against Louisville. That was a more physical group. I'm pretty sure the reason Georgia Tech isn't as good as Louisville is because their work in the trenches is not as good either. What I'm going to be curious to see is what this group in the trenches can do, developing and working into, right, 2 weeks from today when they host SMU at the Bounce House. That's going to be fascinating to see. I have UCF losing that game. By the way, I guess that makes me a West Florida fan again, but nonetheless. So I say all
Argonauts.
I mean, we don't have anybody named Jason on this show, so that doesn't work. Oh, wait. The Sentinels beat writer Jason Beatty. He's the Argonite. Anyways, no.
That's the actual University of West Florida.
Nice what you did there, Drew. Anyways, listen. I was going to say that about you quoting 2013 and 15 jerseys, and I didn't want to be that rude. Nerd. No.
Well, I owned them.
Hashtag you problem. Anyways, no, listen, man. I don't want to hear about your fire hazard of a closet right now. But what I will say is this. This is, regardless of how you feel and how much of a hater fan you want to be, yeah, I said it, to denounce that there's nothing to grow from this game is ridiculous.
Well, it's categorically false.
Correct. Thank you, Drew. Whether it's last week where UCF left 14 points on the board in penalties, or this week where there were 14 points left on the field in turnovers inside the red zone, UCF did not do as well as they should have. And there was opportunities to win the game in Louisville, and they took advantage of opportunities that were left to them in this game. And that ability to take advantage of opportunity was the kind of jump you were trying to see from game A to game B here. Okay? To deny that anything got better is just somebody living in a state of misery. I'm sorry, that is objectively true. As much of a University of West Florida fan as I allegedly am, those are the facts of the case, and they should not be in dispute.
Well, Kyle, I apologize. I'm so sorry that you have to have those West Florida fan accusations hurled at you because considering someone that agreed with you in both in the cases of Louisville and SMU, I would not want to have that happen to me. But this is going to
be worse. You can be confused for Eric Lopez all the time.
Oh,
even
boy.
even at the
Look,
University
Drew,
of West Central Florida.
Drew, you've been called so many names. Are you Micah Resco? Are you Leroy Jenkins? Or like who? Or Eric Lopez? Like
The answer is yes.
Take an alter ego and stick with it.
I am an agent of chaos. What you make of it is kind of how you view it.
Well, now you're Heath Ledger. Just pick one.
Oh, my.
So, okay. So, look, this is we love to have fun here on the Black and Gold Banner, and this is going to be a very fun week in the lead up to the Georgia Tech game. Drew, you're going to be having your knee-jerk reactions article out very soon. Excited to see what you do with that. Kyle, what are you working on right now?
Well, at this point, listen, after I make the trip over to Jacksonville to cover the Jacksonville Jaguars with one Shaquem Griffin on defense, by the way, I'll be watching him battle the Colts. I was looking forward to him battling Michael Pittman Jr., but Pittman's out, so we'll see how that works. But I will be ready to go. I got some stuff, some questions warmed up to bring to the presser on Monday, where Gus Malzahn will be speaking. At one point, we were informed that the Big 12 commissioner was going to be in the house on Monday, but they moved that, they postponed that for a bit. No explanation at this time why that was that I've heard about, but I can guarantee you that if I can be there for whatever they date that, I will be there to ask whatever questions. And if you have some you'd like to have asked, let us know. But yeah, so once I get that to that presser, the preview for Georgia Tech will be on its way.
Awesome. Of course, from me, you'll get the weekly nightcap out later this week to see about all the other happenings going around on UCF Sports. And trust me, there is a lot happening right now. And you can also see this very live stream on our Black and Gold Banneret podcast feed, where we'll also put out this week's new episode later on in the week. And because Georgia Tech, we are going to see the honor during that game. They're going to honor the 2022 class for the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame. During this week for the Black and Gold Banneret, you'll get some special Hall of Fame coverage where we got to talk to all 5 members of this inductee class. Along, Kyle, you joined me on for one of them. That was fun, and I can't wait for the masses to see it all. And I'll be there with all 5 of them, joining variously by Jeff Sharon as well as Eric Lopez. So that will be up on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel. By the way, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. We recently crossed 400 subscribers on there. We would love to see that grow even more throughout the course of the season. You can also follow me at It's Bryson Turner on Twitter. Drew, where can they follow you?
If you haven't blocked me yet, you can follow me at StatBoyDrew on Twitter.
Kyle?
If that isn't the difference between you and me on social media, I don't know what is. But
because I'm Eric Lopez.
Oh, God, here we go. No, you're Mike Oresco. I'm Kyle Nash. I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Twitter at the SOTG, on Instagram as the same, the SOTG, and find me on Facebook as the student of the game.
He is not Eric Lopez.
I am not Eric Lopez.
So this is going to be a really fun week leading up to a very great, nice return to the bounce house where this week has been a nice bounce back for the UCF Knights. So for Andrew and Kyle, my name is Bryson Turner. Thank you all so much for sticking around with us for the past hour and a half. I know it's very late. So thank you all so much for sticking around. For Drew and Kyle, I am Bryson Turner, and go Knights and charge on.